Tods Amendment by Rudyard Kipling.
Now Todd's mamma was a simply charming woman, and everyone in Simla knew Tods. Most men had saved him from death on occasions, but he was beyond his heir's control altogether, and perilled his life daily to find out what would happen if you pulled a mountain battery mule's tail. He was an utterly fearless young pagan, about 6 years old, and the only baby who ever broke the holy calm of the Supreme Legislative Council. It happened this way. Todd's pet goat got loose and fled up a hill off the Boiler-Gungy Road. Todd's after it until it burst into the Vice-Regal Lodge lawn, then attached to Peterhof. The council was sitting at the time, and the windows were open because it was warm. The Red Lancer in the porch told Tods to go away, but Todd knew the Red Lancer and most of the members of the council personally. Moreover, he had a firm hold of the kid's collar and was being dragged along across all of the flower beds. "Give my salam to the Long Council Sahib and ask him to help me take Moti back," gasped Tods. The council heard the noise through the open windows, and after an interval was seen the shocking spectacle of a legal member and a lieutenant governor helping, under the direct patronage of the commander-in-chief and a viceroy, one small and very dirty boy in a sailor suit and a tangle of brown hair, to coerce a lively and rebellious kid. They headed it off down the path to the mall, and Tods went home in triumph, and told his mamma that all the council of Sahabs had been helping him to catch Moti, whereat his mamma smacked Tods for interfering with the administration of the empire. But Tods met the legal member next day and told him in confidence that if the legal member ever wanted to catch a goat, that he, Tods, would give him all the help in his power.
"Thank you, Tods,"
said the legal member. Tods was the idol of some 80 Jampunis and half as many Says. He saluted them all as, "Oh, brother." It had never entered his head that any living human being could disobey his orders, and he was the buffer between the servants and his mamma's wrath. The working of that household turned on Tods, who was adored by everyone from the Dhobi to the dog boy. Even Fute Khan, the villainous loafer Kit from Mussoorie, shirked risking Todd's displeasure for fear his co-mates should look down on him. So Tods had honor in the land from Boiler-Gungy to Chota Simla, land ruled justly according to his lights. Of course, he spoke Urdu, but he also had mastered many queer side speeches, like the Choli Bote of the women, and held grave converse with shopkeepers and hill coolies alike. He was precocious for his age, and his mixing with natives had taught him some of the more bitter truths of life, the meanness and the sordidness of it. He used, over his bread and milk, to deliver solemn and serious aphorisms translated from the vernacular into the English that made his mamma jump and vow that Tods must go home next hot weather. Just when Tods was in the bloom of his power, the Supreme Legislature were hacking out a bill for the submontane tracts, a revision of the then Act, smaller than the Punjab Land Bill, but affecting a few 100,000 people nonetheless. The legal member had built and bolstered and embroidered and amended that bill till it looked beautiful on paper. Then the council began to settle what it called the minor details, as if any Englishman legislating for natives knows enough to know which are the minor and which are the major points from the native points of view by any measure. That bill was a triumph of quote-unquote safeguarding the interests of the tenant. One clause provided that the land should not be leased for any longer terms than 5 years at a stretch, because if the landlord had a tenant bound for, say, 20 years, he would squeeze the very life out of him. The notion was to keep up a stream of independent cultivators in the submontane tracts, and ethnologically and politically The notion was correct. The only drawback was that it was altogether wrong. A native's life in India implies the life of his son. Wherefore you cannot legislate for one generation at a time. You must consider the next from the native point of view. Curiously enough, the native now and then, and in northern India more particularly, hates being overprotected against himself. There was a Naga village once where they lived on dead and buried commissariat mules. But that is another story. For many reasons to be explained later, the people concerned objected to the bill. The native member of the council knew as much about Punjabis as he knew about Charing Cross. He had said in Calcutta that, quote, the bill was entirely in accord with the desires of that large and important class, the cultivators, and so on, and so on, and so on, unquote. The legal member's knowledge of natives was limited to English-speaking Dubaris and his own red Chonpazis. The sub-montane tracts concerned no one in particular. The deputy commissioners were a good deal too driven to make representations, and the measure was one which dealt with small landholders only. Nevertheless, the legal member prayed that it might be correct, for he was a nervously conscientious man. He did not know that no man can tell what natives think unless he mixes with them with the varnish off, and not always then. But he did the best he knew. So the measure came up to the Supreme Council for the final touches, while Tods patrolled the Burra-Simla Bazaar in the morning rides and played with the monkey belonging to Ditamule, de Bonya, and listened as children listens to the stray talk about this new freak of La Sahib's. One day there was a dinner party at the house of Todd's mamma, and the legal member came. Tods was in bed, but he kept awake till he heard the bursts of laughter from the men over coffee. Then he padded out in his little red flannel dressing gown and his night suit and took refuge by the side of his father, knowing that he would not be sent back.
See the miseries of having a family,
said Todd's father, giving Todd 3 prunes and some water in a glass that had been used for claret, and telling him to sit still. Tods sucked the prunes slowly, knowing that he would have to go when they were finished, and sipped the pink water like a man of the world as he listened to the conversation. Presently, the legal member, talking shop to the head of a department, mentioned his bill in its full name, the Sub-Montane Track Rayatwari Revised Enactment. Tods caught the one native word and, lifting up his small voice, said, "Oh, I know all about that. Has it been mutated yet, Councillor Sahib?"
"How much?"
said the legal member. "Mutated, amended, put thick, made nice to please the Tamil." The legal member left his place and moved up next to Tods.
"What do you know about Ratachari, little man?" he said.
"I am not a little man. I am Tods, and I know all about it. Ditamul and Jungala and Amirnath and Orlaks, my friends, tell me about it in the bazaar when I talk to them."
"Oh, they do they? And what do they say, Tods?"
Tods tucked his feet under his red flannel dressing gown and said, "I must think." The legal member waited patiently. Then Tods, with infinite compassion, "You don't speak my talk, do you, Councillor Sahib?"
"No, I am sorry to say I do not,"
said the legal member. "Very well," said Tods. "I must think in English." He spent a minute putting his ideas in order and began very slowly translating in his mind from the vernacular to English, as many Anglo-Indian children do. You must remember that the legal member helped him on by questions when he halted, for Tods was not equal to the sustained flight of oratory that follows. "Dita Merle says the thing that you talk of is a child, and it was made up by fools." "I do not think you are a fool, Councillor Sahib," said Todd hastily. "You caught my goat, And that is what the mole says. I am not a fool, and why should the seeker say I am a child? I can see if the land is good, and if the landlord is good. If I am a fool, the sin is upon my own head. For 5 years I take my ground, for which I have saved money, and a wife I take too, and a little son is born. The mole has one daughter now, but he says that he will have a son soon. And he says, at the end of 5 years, by this new bandobust, I must go. And if I do not go, I get fresh seals and tax stamps on the papers, perhaps in the middle of the harvest. And I go to the law courts once is wisdom, but to go twice is Jahannam. This is quite true, explained Tods gravely. All my friends say so. And the Tamal says, always rest taxes and paying money to Valkils and chaprasis and law courts every 5 years, or else the landlord makes me go. Why do I want to go? Am I a fool? Am I a fool? Do not know after 40 years good land when I see it? Let me die. But if this new bandobust is for 15 years, that is good and wise. My little son is a man, and I am burnt, and he takes the ground, or another ground, paying once only for the tax stamps and the papers, and his little son is born, and at the end of 15 years is a man too. And what profit is there in 5 years and fresh papers? Nothing but trouble. We are not young men who take these lands, but old ones. Not farmers, but tradesmen with little money. And for 15 years we shall have peace. Nor are we children that the Sikar should treat us so. Here Tods stopped short, for the whole table were listening, and the legal member said to Tods,
Is that all?
All that I can remember, said Tods. But you should see Ditamal's big monkey. It is just like a councillor, Sahib. Tods, go to bed, said his father. Tods gathered up his dressing gown tail and departed. The legal member brought his hand down on the table with a crash. By Jove, said the legal member, I believe the boy is right. A short tenure is the weak point. He left early, thinking over what Tods had said. Now it was obviously impossible for the legal member to play with a Bunya's monkey by way of getting understanding, but he did better. He made inquiries, always bearing in mind the fact that the real native, not the hybrid university-trained mule, is as timid as a colt, and little by little he coaxed some of the men whom the measure concerned most intimately to give in their views, which squared very closely with Todd's evidence. So the bill was amended in that clause, and the legal member was filled with an uneasy suspicion that native members represent very little except the orders they carry on their bosoms. But he put the thought from him as a liberal. He was a most liberal man. After a time, the news spread through the bazaars that Tods had got the bill recast in the tenure clause, and if Todd's mamma had not interfered, Tods would have made himself sick on the baskets of fruit and pistachio nuts and Kabuli grapes and almonds that crowded the veranda. Till he went home, Tods ranked some few degrees before the viceroy in popular estimation, but for the little life of him, Tods could not understand why. In the legal member's private paper box still lies the rough draft of the Submontane Tracts Riotari revised enactment, and opposite the 22nd clause, penciled in blue chalk and signed by the legal member, are the words Tods Amendment.